Incensed over the depiction of graphic violence in comics such as The Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, and crime suspense stories, the United States Senate formed a subcommittee on juvenile delinquency. The proceedings were further sensationalized by Frederick Wertham's book, The Seduction of the Innocent, which alleged that comic books were a corrupting influence on the youth. While Wertham's findings were later disputed, the damage was done. The Comic Code Authority was formed that same year as a self-regulating body in the comic book industry. Stan Lee opposed this viewpoint presented by Wertham and was quoted as saying,
"To me, Wertham was a fanatic, pure and simple. I used to debate with him, which was fun, because I usually won, but that was rarely publicized. He once claimed he did a survey that demonstrated that most of the kids in reform schools were comic book readers. So I said to him, if you do another survey, you'll find that most of the kids who drank milk are comic book readers. Should we ban milk?" His arguments were patently sophistic, and they aren't being charitable, because he was a psychiatrist, so people listened.
Lee continued to speak out for what he believed in, which led to a major overhaul of the Comics Code after Lee boldly chose to forego the code approval on a comic book storyline in 1971. Lee recalls,
"The book back and said, you can't publish this book." I said, "We won't put our seal of approval on." I said, "Why not?" They said, "Well, you're mentioning drugs." I said, "We're not telling kids to take drugs."
Right, showing the
and I said,
effects.
I was asked to do this by a branch of the federal government.
Right.
"Sorry, you can't do it." Well, it's one time when I was very proud of my publisher. I said, "Martin, I want to put these books out anyway."
as the Nixon administration's United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare did in fact ask Stan Lee if he'd be willing to do an anti-drug storyline in one of his more popular Marvel Comics titles. However, this request led to the Comics Code beginning to debate about making changes to the code. The changes were likely going to go into effect sometime in mid-1971. Lee did not want to wait for that long, so he did as he said. Lee just released the proposed storyline without code approval. And here is Amazing Spider-Man number 96's cover, all codeless. The first issue sees Spider-Man saving a kid's life who tries to kill himself while high. Then the second issue makes the story more personal. Peter Parker's roommate, Harry Osborn, can't get over the fact that Mary Jane Watson isn't as into him as he is into her, so he starts buying illegal pills. Meanwhile, Harry's dad, Norman Osborn, has realized that he is actually the Green Goblin, and, well, he kept getting amnesia and he would forget his Goblin identity. Peter comes home and finds out that Harry has overdosed, and while Peter is dealing with him, the newly reborn Green Goblin shows up. The final issue has Spider-Man fight Green Goblin and gets Harry to the hospital. In the end, Spider-Man stops the Green Goblin by forcing him to see his son in the hospital, overdosed. DC Comics was actually more pissed than anyone else, as DC's executive editor Carmine Infantino was waiting for the new code to go into effect so that DC could do their own anti-drug story, and they were irked that Marvel just went out and did theirs without code approval. DC's came out later though in 1971, with Green Arrow dealing with his sidekick Speedy becoming addicted to heroin with this now infamous Neil Adams cover. Over time, the Comic Code Authority would ease its restrictions. Monsters were once again allowed in comic books, allowing the surge of supernatural comics that included the seminal Tomb of Dracula by Gene Colan and Marv Wolfman, and that Comic Code stamp became smaller and smaller as if to signify its shrinking influence. Comic books became considerably more mature in the 1980s, with many publishers starting an adult reader imprint, such as DC's Vertigo Comics, which existed outside of the Comic Code Authority's purview. By 2011, the code was discontinued after being abandoned by numerous publishers over the ensuing decade. Either way though, Lee deserves credit for the relaxation of the Comics Code and the emphasizing of the importance of allowing some extra leeway for the medium's artist. And that's why it is my pick. And folks, it's been a Comic Book Minute. Like, share, and comment, and subscribe, folks. And as usual, we'll see you on the next one.